Stepping out into the tourney grounds for the first duel, John couldn't help but compare the setup to that at Lannisport. There, Jaime had built a ready-made arena. Here, it was simply a fenced-off section outside the city itself. While John actually in some ways appreciated the open feel of the place, he preferred the arena in Lannisport. There, the crowd felt part of the event. Here, they seemed oddly removed. They also didn't seem that interested in the early duels. However, as John faced his opponent, something seemed to change in the crowd. Excited, hushed whispers were heard, and people moved forward to get a look at him. John knew word had spread of what had occurred between him and Edmure, and he welcomed it. Jaime had taught him early on that being known was helpful. So John intended to make a show for those watching. Unfortunately, his opponent wouldn't be much help for that. Across from him stood one of the multitudes of Freys who'd come to the tourney. In the melee, there had been almost 12 of them, and all but one had been beaten without defeating an opponent. The one who had actually managed to beat somebody only did so because the hound had practically beaten him for him. The boy facing John was yet another Walder. He shuddered to think just how many of them there were. "You ready to taste defeat, bastard?" Walder said, and John sighed. Why is it the least talented are always the loudest? He wondered as he readied his sword. John moved quickly. The thin sword flashed in a feint, and then it was over. 2 hits, one to the sword hand and one to the arm, and the fray was yielding. John turned to the crowd and shrugged his shoulders, much to their amusement giving the laughs and cheers he got. He walked to the back, and when he got there, he saw Loras smirking from the sidelines. "Seriously, you got a damn fray," Loras japed. "I know. When are you up?" "The fight after next. I'm fighting a foss away," Loras said, and John noticed something off in his voice. "Loras, oh what? It's nothing." "Loras, it's just that Garland's been spending a lot of time with the Fossaways. I think Father sees a match for him there," Loras said sadly. "B, I'm sure your brother would have come if he could, Loras. Now go out and beat your future good sister's kin," John said, and Loras smiled. The 2 boys waited together until Loras was called. John walked with him to the entrance. "Remember, don't be too flash, Loras. Win, then show off," John said, and Loras nodded. He watched as his friend went out to face his opponent. The Fossaway lad had him beat in size, but John knew Loras would beat him as long as he reined in his tendency to show off. Both he and Jaime had repeatedly told Loras it was a fault that would cause him problems if he didn't get it under control. John had gone so far as to say that he should use all the build-up and after a match for showing off, but be completely serious during one. Loras had seemed to listen and had improved tremendously, but this was the first real test. John had not been able to go to the tourney at Highgarden, so didn't know if Loras took the lessons to heart there. Here, though, he would get the chance to find out, and he looked to see Jaime up in the crowd watching intently also. Should Loras still show the same traits, both he and Jaime would be cleared to show their disappointment to him, something he knew his friend would respond to. In the end, though it appeared all his worries were for nothing. Loras beat the Fossaway 5-1. The one hit the other boy managed to get on him was one that even John would have had trouble avoiding. He smiled as Loras came back through the entrance, patting his friend on the back. They walked together to get him something to drink. "You were good out there," John said, and was happy to see Loras' smile. I need to be. This time you're getting beat, John," Loras said, and John just shook his head laughing. The 2 boys continued to mess around and jape with each other. They mock sparred, but really, they were just killing time. There would be 2 more matches for each to face in order to qualify for the melee which was tomorrow. Both had looked and identified those they felt would be the toughest opponents. Waymar Royce just barely managed to sneak under the age limit and would be a tough opponent, though not as hard as his brother would have been. There was also a couple of boys from the Riverlands that John had caught looking at him earlier. No doubt the fish had put them up to going after him if given the chance. There were 2 other lads from the Vale, Michael Redford, who John had seen during the tourney of Lannisport, and Harold Harding, who was related to John Arryn, who were talented. But for John, the biggest threat seemed to come from the large blonde from Tarth, someone that John was certain was a girl, though she had disguised herself so she would not appear one. She was at least a foot taller than he and Loras, and broader than either, but it was her skill with a sword which impressed John. She wielded her long sword as well, and almost as quickly as he did his thinner one. How she had managed to fool everyone he didn't know. But he was of the North, a land where warrior women were welcomed and appreciated. So it would not be John who raised an objection. He hoped and prayed that no one else would either. "You're up." "Did you bribe the judges, John?" Loras asked, raising an eyebrow. "What?" John said, laughing as he looked at his opponent. "Wonder if this one's named Walder as well." Loras said, and John shook his head. He walked out to face his second fray of the day. This one was not named Walder, though he may as well have been, and just looking at him, John could have sworn he was facing the same boy he'd already beaten. Could that be it? Was that the hidden secret of House Frey? Was there really not a large brood of weasels, but just one of each age who pretended to be many? John felt himself smile and readied himself for the fight to begin. Walking back towards Loras barely a moment later, he could see his friend almost falling to the ground in laughter. One hit. One solitary hit he'd gotten on the fray before he yielded. We stand together indeed. They'd have to. They certainly didn't stand apart. John was frustrated. 2 victories were fine and everything, but he hadn't actually done anything. During this fight, the crowd hadn't even bothered to laugh. It was over that quickly. Quantity certainly doesn't breed quality. "Does it, John?" Loras japed as he reached him. "No, it bloody well does not," John said, letting his annoyance out. "Aye? Cheer up. At this rate, they'll be calling you Phrasebane by the end of the duels," Loras said. And John couldn't help but break into laughter. "Aye, well, 2 down, 1 to go. There surely can't be another Frey, can there?" "I don't know, John. There are a damn lot of them," Loras said, and both boys laughed. Looking around the area, John saw all 3 of the Vale lads milling around together, along with both of the Riverlanders. They'd all managed to win their fights. The 2 Riverlanders, John had found out, were a Vance and a Piper, making them brothers or nephews of 2 of the men he knew to be friends of Ed Muir. Across from them, sitting on her own, was the girl from Tarth. She had earlier been going through her forms, and John had been impressed, much more so than he had with any of the others. "Well, wish me luck. It seems this time it's a lad from the Stonelands," Loras said. And John looked out to see his friend's opponent, ready and waiting for him. His attention was torn between Loras and the girl from Tarth. Luckily, Loras won rather quickly and was back pretty soon. It seemed, though, his gambeson had been torn in the fight. Nodding to John, he headed back to where they stored their things to get a new one. Giving John the opportunity to go speak to the girl, he walked over to her and stood in front of her for a second, before finally speaking. "My lady, you're most impressive out there. It shall be an honor to face you." Wanting the girl to, now that while he knew her secret, he was fine with it. She looked at him, her expression torn between panic and anger. Which emotion would win? He knew not. Finally, she made a decision. "I shall look forward to beating you, John," she said, a forced smile on her face. "Confidence without talent is a waste, my lady, though you certainly do have the talent to back up your statement," John said, smiling and getting an even warmer one from her in return. "Brienne, John. You can call me Brienne." "Brienne, may I?" John said, pointing to the space beside her. She nodded, and he sat down. "So it doesn't bother you to see a girl fight in the duels, then?" she asked, staring at him. "I'm from the north. Did you not see Daisy Mormont earlier? If there's a reason girls can't fight as well as boys, then I know not of it, Jon said. Bye! He watched as Brienne breathed a sigh of relief, the two speaking for a while until Loras returned and Brienne stiffened beside him. Loras, this is Brienne. Brienne, this is Loras, Jon said, smirking when Loras's eyebrow raised. It's a pleasure to meet you, Brienne, Loras said, and Jon watched as once again she relaxed. The three of them spoke and japed together, Brienne becoming more and more comfortable as the minutes passed, until finally it was time for Jon to face his final opponent of the day. He stood up and said his goodbyes to Brienne, and he and Loras walked to the entrance. Jon looked inside to see who he was facing, but couldn't see anyone there, before a big, lumbering boy bumped past him and walked out to the crowd. At least it's not another Frey, Loras said, and Jon smirked as he walked out. The lad he faced was another Riverlander, though, and as Jon swung his sword, he wondered just how he had managed to make it this far. The boy had no talent for swordplay whatsoever. He just swung his sword as hard as he could, and slow as he was, Jon could have dodged the blows with his eyes closed. With a quick movement to the left, Jon aimed 2 blows in quick succession to the boy's hand, knocking the sword from his grip. A sweep of his leg later, and the boy was on the ground, yielding to Jon's sword at his neck. He turned and headed back to Loras. He had made it to the melee but felt no accomplishment whatsoever. Each of his opponents had been as bad as the other. He shook his head. Reaching Loras, they barely had time to talk, as his duel was up right away. Jon watched as Loras went out to fight his opponent. While not as easy as Jon's victory, Loras won 5-3, and he too had made it to the melee. Jon breathed a sigh of relief. He may not be happy how he got there, but both of them had, and in the end, that was all that matters. Well, looks like an early night for us tonight, he japed as Loras came up to him. Easy for you to say, I'm having dinner with my family, Loras said. You'll come, won't you? It's a family dinner, Loras. I'd love to come, but your family obviously want time to themselves, Jon said, and he was speaking the truth. The thoughts of dinner with Marjorie, Loras, and their family was appealing, but he had not been invited, so he knew it was a family-only occasion. Your family too, Jon, Loras said. And Jon smiled before patting him on the shoulder. Aye, you too, Loras. Now as your family, go now and eat with the rest of them, Jon said, laughing. They messed around for a few more moments before Brienne walked over to head out for her match. Jon and Loras nodded and wished her luck, not that she needed it, as she absolutely demolished the poor boy she faced. With her victory, the melee field was now complete. Jon and Loras, Brienne, the 2 Riverlanders, and the 3 lads from the Vale had all made it. I wish you good fortune for the morrow, Brienne, Jon said as he and Loras bid their farewells. Aye, you too, Jon, Loras, Brienne said, turning to leave. Day! Tyrion sat at his desk in his office, Jerian sitting with him. Jaime had gone with Loras to speak to Lady Olenna and Lord Mace and inform them of their trip north. The duels had left them all, apart from Jon, in high spirits. Garion had laughed at the lad when he was annoyed he'd face so little competition, telling him he'd need all his energy for the morrow anyway, that the melee was a different beast altogether, something his aunt had agreed on. She was still not happy that he and Loras were taking part at all. Jenna, Emmon, and the children had met up with Kevin, and they'd all gone to welcome the Lion's Roar to dock before heading out for rest of the day. The second Pinnacle ship had been diverted here before heading to White Harbor, as it would now be taking Jaime, Loras, and Jon north also. After the events in the throne room, Jaime was now even more eager to show both ships off to send a clear message to the Crown. Mess with us at your peril. Jon had gone to the inn the Northerners were staying in, to both congratulate Daisy and Smallgen on their performances, and to escort Ser Jorah and his lady wife here for their meeting. He'd spoken to him about the offer to the Umbers, and Tyrion had made a few small changes to the terms. But still, they were more than favorable, and he assumed the Northern Lord would be amenable to them. "Lord Tyrion, your guests have arrived. Show them in, Lara," Tyrion said to the blonde. "This way, my lord, my lady," Lara said, and showed Ser Jorah and Lady Linesi into the room. Tyrion and Garyon both rose and offered them a seat, his uncle looking confused at Jon's absence. "Is Jon not with you?" Garyon asked. "Aye, he is, my lord. He just went to fetch the wolf some food. He had a torrid time keeping it under control when we left the inn." Ser Jorah said, a smile on his face. "Aye, apart from him and Joy, Ghost doesn't heed anyone." Garyon said with a smirk. "Joy, my lord?" "For you," Lady Lindsay asked. "My daughter, Joy Hill. She and Jon are very fond of each other," Jurian said. "Come now, uncle. It's more than that. Jon's basically her big brother at this point, my lady," Tyrion said, getting a sweet smile from Linesi. "My lords, my lady," Jon said as he entered the room. "Ghost all right, Jon?" Jurian asked. "Hungry little sod. A whole leg of lamb I fed him this morn, and still he wanted to rush off and eat from the stalls. Sooner the better we're off in the north, and he can hunt for himself," Jon said as he walked to stand behind Tyrion. "You're going north, Jon?" Ser Jorah asked. "Aye, Ser Jorah, Lord Jaime. Loras and I are going to White Harbor, and then on to visit my uncle at the Wall before heading to Winterfell, once the tourney is finished. Actually, I had completely forgotten to ask, sir." "Ask Jon." "Boys," Ser Jorah looked at him. Well, I'm not sure how you plan on traveling home." So I asked Lord Jaime and he agreed. "If you would like, then perhaps you, Lady Linesi, and the rest of the northern party could join us on the Lion's Roar. It would cut down travel time and you could travel back to Bear Island from either White Harbor or Castle Black, whichever is easiest." Ser Jorah looked at his wife and she smiled before he turned back to Jon. "Jon, aye. That sounds like a fine idea, lad. I could visit my father and introduce him to my wife and then travel from there. We'd cut down the travel home by many moons. I'll speak to the others, but I know Daisy and Smallgen will be fine with it, as I'm sure Sir Wendell and the Karstarks will also," Jorah said. "Excellent. You will find the Pinnacle ships a much more pleasant way to travel, my lady," Tyrion said. "Now to business." Jon reached over and got the glasses and bottle of wine. He poured out Tyrion and Gerion's before doing the same for Lady Lindsay and Ser Jorah. Then placing the bottle back down, he reached over to the shelf and took the book down, which showed their Westeros trade in wood and furs, and handed it to Tyrion. "Currently, we import wood, furs, and sundries from House Manderly, and what we don't use ourselves we distribute through the west and beyond. Lately, though, we've been unable to fully keep up with demand in the east. What Jon proposed to me was that you could not only help us with the demand from your own stocks, but could also serve as a sort of base for supplies from other northern houses. They would deliver to you, and we'd take it on from there," Tyrion said. "Aye, that's what Jon said to us also," Jorah said. "To do this would require an expansion of the docks to allow Pinnacle ships to dock. It would also require a secure area where supplies could be left, and I've also heard that you wish us to deliver foodstuff and other products from the Reach to you also?" Tyrion asked. "Aye, that's true. Though the cost of the expansion of the docks, the building of a secure area is something that at the moment we are not able to cover," Jorah said, and Tyrion smirked at the look his wife gave him. "Jon, do you have the 2 sets of figures, thanks?" he said as John handed them to him before he finished speaking. Our Westerosi trade, should you cover it, totals 200,000 gold dragons a year, Tyrion said, watching as Jorah gulped, and Lady Lenisi looked on calculatingly. How much of that would we stand to make, my lord? Lady Lindsay asked. John, he said, turning to the boy. My lady, that's your end of the trading figure. That's what we'll be paying you after expenses and costs. You should clear at least 3/4 of that, so around 150,000 a year, give or take. Surely you jest, John, Sir Jorah said, shaking his head in disbelief. No, sir. Given the demand for wood, the need for furs, let alone should we find a market for other items, I'd say the minimum return would be that amount. Wouldn't you agree, my lord? John said, looking at Tyrion. I would, but what other items? Tyrion asked, wondering what John was speaking about. I was thinking, my lord, Bear Island lies in the Bay of Ice. My lord, I have some ideas I wish to speak to you on once I return from the north. There are some things I need to check first, John said, and Tyrion looked on intrigued, as did Sir Jorah. Very well, John. I'm interested to see what else you come up with, Tyrion said. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, the building work. John told me that labor is cheaper in the north than south. Is that true, Sir Jorah? I'd imagine so. Probably half the cost, given the more expensive prices you have here, Jorah said, laughing. Is stone a problem, my lord? Does Bear Island have stone, or would it need to bring some in? Stone we have, my lord, that we have in plenty. Good, good. John, remove the stone and slash the labor costs in half, Tyrion said, and John frantically scribbled away before handing him a piece of parchment. You sure about this, John? Tyrion said, and John nodded. Very well. We estimate it'll cost 100,000 gold dragons to build the docks, a small keep and a large enclosed space to store both food and the wood and furs. Sir Jorah gulped, but Lady Lindsay smiled. As per John's request, we're prepared to cover these costs with an interest-free loan, which you can pay off at 10,000 gold dragons per year from the first year you receive payment from us, or should you wish, you can at any point pay off the balance, Tyrion said, and both Sir Jorah and Lady Lindsay looked shocked. Aye, my lord. I don't know what to say. Aye, we thank you, and look forward to doing business with your family in the future, Jorah said as John poured each of them another glass of wine. When they finished the wine, John escorted Sir Jorah and Lady Lindsay out of the room, both of them seeming incredibly pleased by the turn of events. It took a few moments for John to come back, and when he did, he sat down in front of the desk, a large smile on his face. Thank you for that, my lord. You didn't need to give them an interest-free loan, John said. Bye. Aye, probably not, John, but this will be a big benefit to us. No point starting off on the wrong foot. And besides, you wrote it down as a suggestion. This was your idea, lad. Really, you should be getting paid in coin by us for it, Tyrion said, looking at the boy. I don't want it, my lord, John said, shaking his head. I know, which is why I have no problem with giving it to the Mormonts. They'll take it after all, and you're right. You know, it will do us good and set us off on a better footing with them, Tyrion said. Now what was this other idea you had, John? Jerian asked. Ice, my lord, John said as both of them looked at him in confusion. Olenna, after sitting down to dinner with her family. Olenna made her way back to her rooms. The last few days were troubling, to say the least. Every piece of information, every time she took a step forward, it felt like the world was conspiring against her. The business with Jon Snow gave her pause. Seeing him put the fish in his place at the feast had been fun to watch. What had been going through his head trying to attack a boy, she'll never know. Her grandson had been right there too. Had he laid a hand on him, she'd have fixed the fish herself. Jon Snow did that for her though, and she very much enjoyed seeing it. However, what she saw the next day was something she had thought never to see as long as the stag was on the throne. She was appalled to see that after his disgraceful actions the night before, not only was Edmure Tully unrepentant, but he was seeking to have the boy maimed for his own actions. Watching on as the boy, though not only showed no fear of the potential outcome, but seemed to relish the chance to put the fish in his place, yet again had been something she would remember for a very long time. To then add even more insult to Tully's injured pride, Jon Snow went one step further. To see someone stand in front of the Stag King and defend the Targaryens was incredible. For years no one dared speak anything that could be attributed as love for the dragons. But there in the throne room itself, a 10-name-day-old boy put the fish in his place once again, and at the same time called him and his house out for the oath breakers they were. For years, those houses that served Robert had lorded over the Targaryen loyalists, House Tyrell being chief among the latter. Sneers and outright scorn had been directed at them, and they had to grin and bear it. But watching Jon Snow call out hypocrisy in its simplest form was an absolute delight. The boy was something else. Had she been gifted with a son like that, they'd rule the damn 7 kingdoms already. With him and Marjorie tied together, there would be no limit to what they could achieve. Alas, the boy was a bastard, which ruled that out, but given the way her granddaughter spoke about the prince, even a bastard may be a better option. During dinner, she had noticed both her granddaughter and grandson were quieter than usual. She waited and waited, but since no one was willing to speak, she had decided to. "So will one of you tell me what's on your minds, or am I to sit here and try to guess?" she said impatiently. "Mother, please, I'm not thinking of anything," her son said, and she snorted. "I was speaking to the children, you silly oaf. The last thought you had in your mind flew by so quickly you never even realized it was there." "Grandmother," Marjorie said, the reproaching nature of her voice surprising her. But while she admired her little rose growing a backbone, she did not like it directed at her. "Well, are you going to tell me then?" she asked as she looked directly at her granddaughter. "Fine, since you want to know. Joffrey is a monster, an absolute monster, and if you think I'm marrying him, then you're as much a monster as he is," Marjorie said loudly. Olenna gasped. Never had a granddaughter use such a tone with her. She was lost for words for a second before her Rose jumped up from her seat and ran to her, throwing her arms around her. "I'm sorry, Grandmama, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it," Marjorie said, tears falling from her face. "Hush, child, hush. Tell me everything." She patted her Rose's back and held her tightly to her. Shaking her head at the memory, she sat down and poured herself a glass of wine. What Marjorie had told her had rocked her. The boy was an absolute monster. Her granddaughter was right. Neither he nor his father respected their family or the coin they were spending that came from them. The queen wanted to see them humiliated constantly, and given the monster her son was, growing strong or not, she was no longer sure she could allow them be tied to that family. She had thought she at least had the hand on her side, that at least a political mind such as Jon Arryn could see the benefits of her family and the crown being close. But what Loras told her had happened at the meeting with Lord Jaime and the Hand made her reevaluate that also. He asked Lord Jaime to help the crown out financially, told him it would be good for them to be closer with the crown. When Lord Jaime brought us up and questioned them, they became defensive, grandmother. Lord Jaime asked why they needed his coin if they had ours. Just how much were they spending? Why should he help if they couldn't pay their debts? It was most strange, grandmother. What else, Loras? Lord Jaime told me to tell you, grandmother, to let you know, though I know not why. It's fine, Loras, and all else is well with you. Aye, it is, though I'm looking forward to heading north. North? What do you mean you're going north? Mace asked loudly. Lord Jaime, Jon and I are heading north after the tourney. I'll get to visit the Wall in Winterfell and see where Jon is from. Laura said happily. Olenna poured herself another glass of wine. She was never really a drinker. 1 or 2 glasses were her limit, but the headaches wouldn't go away. She needed to speak to Jaime Lannister, to speak openly and honestly, and the thoughts of it caused her distress. How long had it been since she'd spoken openly and honestly with anyone? How long had it been since she hadn't played a game of some sort? But the bad news, the setbacks, the idea that things were afoot that she was unaware of, wouldn't leave her head. The only piece of actual good news she'd had today was the increased trading deal she was doing with the North. She had been pleased when Lindsay and her husband had come by to negotiate increased trade. She'd even ensured they got a really good deal. When she heard then that the Lannisters were involved, and that once again Jon Snow had been the one come up with some of the ideas, she'd been taken aback. Everywhere she turned, it was the Lannisters and Jon Snow. From the moment he'd appeared on the scene, the Lannisters had been playing a different game to everyone else. Trade deals, gold mines, ships, and windwheels. The list was never-ending, and there, right at the heart of it, was Jaime Lannister and Jon Snow. When she heard that she'd missed Jaime Lannister earlier, she'd nearly shouted in frustration. He had come to speak to her regarding her grandson going north, and she had been stuck elsewhere, listening to the condescension of his sister. No, she would not leave this tourney without speaking to Jaime Lannister and once and for all finding out what the hell game they were playing, and more importantly perhaps, was there room for one more player, Jon. After reading Joy her story and helping tuck her in, the little girl had needed both he and Jerian to stay with her until she fell asleep, as she was not liking her new room at all. Jon headed to his own room to do some reading and to get some sleep. He took the egg from the fire, which had long since burned out in his absence, placed it beside him on the bed, and began to read the book he'd borrowed from Tyrion on the building of King's Landing. As he read it, he began to think someone other than maesters should write these things. Some were so dull and boring that he wondered how even someone who loved to read as much as Tyrion did could manage to get through them. Reading about how Aegon founded it and how his family had expanded it for years afterward should, to Jon, have been far more exciting than Maester Elmond wrote it, as it was given his tiredness. Jon was already starting to doze off. He placed the book on the shelf, undressed, and got ready to get into bed. His mind kept being filled with the idea that something about the duels was off, but try as he could, he just couldn't grasp what it was. He had been annoyed at the quality of those he fought against, with how little they had challenged him. Honestly, Jon expected the fact it was in King's Landing that the standard would be higher than the Lannisport tourney. But since, for whatever reason, he couldn't grasp it tonight, he decided to get his rest while he could. He curled up against the egg, holding it tightly against his chest. The warmth from the fire had faded, yet the egg still felt warm to him. The movements inside had become less frantic and more calm over time. It was almost soothing to him now when he felt the dragon inside move, for he was in no doubt there was life in the egg and it wanted to be freed. Thinking of this, he fell to sleep. The hole in the wall was small, but he squeezed through it, moving swiftly across the ground. He heard the whispers around him, the voices, the clanging of metal, but he didn't care. He had to find her. He had to find her. He moved past the 2 Foots, their metal claws dripping with the lifeblood of the 2 Foots he recognized. Some of those 2 Foots had given him food. Some he had scratched when they came too close or tried to touch him. He belonged to her, only her. One of the 2 Foots tried to catch him with his metal claw, but he was too fast, too used to them for him to be caught. He kept tight to the walls after that. Moving onward, ever onward, he was close. He knew this place. She would bring him here, they would play, and she would hold him tight against her chest. There were more. 2 Foots he recognized laying on the ground, eyes open but never moving. They lay still, and something in him changed. Something he had felt only once or twice in his life. He felt afraid. Would she be all right? Would she be safe here among these 2 Foots who harmed her friends? Would he make it in time? He had to. He needed to. He could take her with him, take her to hide in the places only he knew. The deep, dark places where no 2 Foots would go, where she would be safe. He was in the room now, could smell it everywhere. Death had come to this place. He moved faster now. This was her place, but she was not here. He felt something. Had she ran like he had? Had she managed to get away? He needed to know. So he searched. He passed her small bed and saw the 2 foot she loved the most. She had been hit with the metal claws. She lay as still as those 2 foots outside the room. He could almost hear her, hear what she called this 2 foot, hear how she cried when she got hurt, and how this 2 foot would hold her, just like the girl would hold him. Mother. He knew that was what the girl had called the 2 foot, though he knew not what it meant. More. 2 foots came into the room, and he ran past them as they tried to strike him with the metal claws. He ran to the other place, the place where he and the girl would play, where they would hide, before the girl would jump out yelling and making noise. Would she be there waiting? Was that where she went? He had to know. He needed to know. There were 2 foots in the way, but he moved past them unseen. He saw her then, and he moved towards her. She was laying on the floor, her eyes open. She was as still as the others. He pushed against her as he usually did, only this time she didn't push back. She didn't smile and tell him to stop. She didn't call his name and tell him no. She just lay there, eyes open, but she never moved. He was grabbed by a 2 foot, his eyes looking at him as he dragged him closer. He scratched then and moved as quick as he could. He felt the pain as he got away. He felt the blood drip, the pain from his ears slowing him, though he wished to be gone from that place, to never see it again, to never see her like that. It took him time, but he finally managed to get to the safe place. He curled into a ball and lay down, the pain from his ear and its blood still flowing. Yet for him, all he could feel was a much deeper pain. He had been too late. He hadn't made it in time, and he knew now that he would see the girl no more. John woke up and almost fell from the bed in his eagerness to get away from the dream he'd just had. He couldn't even manage to stand properly and instead fell to his knees and then crawled to the corner of the room. He curled up into a ball and began to cry. He had seen her, seen his sister, seen what they had done to her, and for the first time in his life, Jon Snow knew what it felt like to hate Varys. He had arrived back in King's Landing a week ago, had spent his time in the shadows, watching and waiting to announce his arrival. The trip to Illyrio's had been illuminating. The boy was growing well and would make an excellent king, but there were far too many variables for Varys' liking. The 2 biggest of them were who he'd spent the last week watching, Jaime Lannister and Jon Snow, when his little birds had, for the first time ever, failed him. Varys had taken a more direct role in events in the Westerlands. He had made numerous visits, spent a considerable amount of time and energy on the place, and found out barely anything. On Jon Snow, he found a boy who was well liked, both by lords and the small folk, one who treated everyone he met politely and with respect. On Jaime Lannister, he found a lord so very different to his father, one who the small folk adored and the lords were happy, not afraid, to serve. He had tried and failed to get near the inner circle at Casterly Rock, couldn't even manage to get in with Lord Kevins in Lannisport, and his attempts at infiltrating with the servants had continually delivered no result. Each time he'd gone back, he'd found that the only servants he could get information from were not worth it. What they had to tell he already knew. How Jon Snow doted on little Joy Ill, how he bought her presents and spent so much time with her. Varys knew because he'd seen them together. Disguised as he was, he saw the boy and girl and thought nothing of it. There was nothing substantially special about the boy to Varys' eyes. Yet each time he came back, it seemed he was proven wrong. From trade agreements to shipbuilding, the boy seemed to be involved right at the heart of everything the Lannisters did. He then thought he hit upon a piece of luck. A servant from the inner circle got ill and didn't have the money to pay for treatment. I can help you, Alessia. I understand how expensive it is to see a healer and how little the lords care for those who work under them. I don't know. Lord Jaime's been very good to me. It's fine. All I need is a little information. but it had backfired and he had needed to practically run for his life from Lannisport. The girl's loyalty too tied into the Lannisters. And worse, as he found out later, it was damn Jon Snow who helped her get treatment. The boy foiling his plans without even trying. He had made one or two more subtle attempts, had one of his little birds get close to Lancel Lannister, only for yet again the route to become blocked. It was all so tiresome, yet he persevered. It was what he was good at after all. Over the last 2 years, each time he received news from the Westerlands, he shuddered, not at the nature of the news itself, but simply on the basis he, like everyone else, was in the dark, and he cared for it not a bit. In King's Landing, he was king though, so when the fat stag announced a tourney, he began to plan and wait. He told everyone he would be heading to Braavos, and instead snuck out into the city and waited in disguise, let them believe the spider to be elsewhere, while there in the shadows he spun his web and waited for the flies to land. He had leaned quite a lot this week, learned that perhaps the Lannisters and Sir Barristan were in it together, learned that it was Tyrion Lannister and not Jaime that seemed to be the one playing the game. He had known about the Lannisters' tavern and had tried to infiltrate it a number of times, only for his little birds to return with clipped wings. So he had resorted to another plan. If he couldn't see what was happening inside, he would instead see what happened once they left. His little birds followed, and he watched and waited, and in the end he received his rewards. Following Jon Snow to the tavern, his little birds had found him while he had been catching up on his correspondence. He had left the little room he'd rented and made his way to the house opposite and waited. Seeing Jon Snow leave, followed by Sir Barristan a few moments later, had been enlightening to say the least. Watching the way the night followed, one would almost think he was acting a Kingsguard, and that was when it hit him. He followed to the altercation with Sir Aris, and to the farce in the throne room, and after that it was as clear as day. He knew almost all now. He'd have to check to be certain, but he knew what they were up to, and he could kick himself for not knowing sooner. But what to do? Did this help him or hurt him? And if it was the latter, then how should he go about fixing it? The little girl would keep Jon Snow in line, but he abhorred harming children, and there was no way out of it if he went that route. Though, should it be necessary, then he would not hesitate to do it. Just coming out and telling the king the truth would split the realm and allow for Aegon to come in. But would Aegon be accepted after the realm learned of Jon Snow's true origin? He began to worry that he would not, that one son of Rhaegar hidden and protected was one thing, trying to then pawn off another would be something the realm would not accept. He would need to speak to his friend. There were too many variables, especially given Jon Snow's friendship with they Tyrells. Should they join with the Lannisters, they'd be practically unstoppable. Even if Aegon brought Dorne on his side, they along with the Golden Company couldn't win in a straight fight, and they would not gain other allies now. Perhaps it was for the best if the boy had an accident, simply remove a piece from the game. Yes, he thought that seemed to be the best option. He would speak to Illyrio and they would decide. Lord Varys, will you be heading to the melee? I think I will, Lord Mace. My son's competing. He's one of the favorites, Mace said, puffing his chest out. Him and his friend, my lord, Jon. He's a good lad, always does right by my Loras, a good friend to have. Mace said, smiling. We all have friends, we do right by my lord. Varys tittered. Jon. Loras knocking on his door had finally brought Jon out of the state of despair and agony he was in. The image of his sister's mutilated body was there every time he closed his eyes. How long he had sat there weeping he knew not, but he was cold and felt as if he had been crying for hours. He shouted to Loras that he'd meet him to break his fast and place the egg back in the fire. Holding it brought him a small measure of relief. But it wasn't until Ghost arrived while he broke his fast that he could begin to not think of Rhaenys all the time. The young man had then come from the smith's to measure him for his armor, and when he asked what design he wanted for his shield, Jon had looked at him like he had two heads. What did he care what was on his shield, given what he'd seen the night before? He had almost snapped at the poor boy, only for Ghost to push up against him. Taking a breath and closing his eyes, John saw an image and asked for some parchment to draw it on. "Are you sure, my lord?" the boy said, laughing. I am, and I'm no lord. It's just John," he said to the boy. "Well, John, this is bound to raise some eyebrows." "Good," he said, handing the boy a few coppers, which the boy was most grateful for. When he left, John took another piece of parchment and began to draw yet again. The face was exactly as he seen it, chubby and pale with small pig-like eyes, the sigil, a black manticore on a red field, and John memorized them both before throwing them in the fire. He walked to Tyrion's room and found him alone going over papers. "My lord." "John, how can I help?" "I was wondering, my lord. Do you have a book on sigils?" "I'm sorry, John. I forgot to bring one with me. Maybe I can help, though. I do have a good memory, though given what I just said, perhaps I don't." Tyrion japed before his face changed back to one more serious. "A black manticore on a red field, my lord." "Sire, the manticore is House Lorch, but the red field's Amory's personal sigil." "Amory, my lord." "Aye, Amory Lorch, a horrible, unpleasant man my father used to. What's this about John?" Tyrion said, shaking his head. "Nothing, my lord. Just saw the sigil and wondered whose it was." "Are you sure that's all, John?" Tyrion asked, his concern clear. "Aye, it is, I think. Maybe I'm just nervous about the melee and I'm focusing on silly stuff, my lord," John said, hoping his smile would reassure Tyrion and satisfy his inquisitive nature. "You've nothing to be nervous of, John, although you do have a lot of coin on you," Tyrion japed, and this time John actually laughed. A few hours later, he had tried his best to put the thoughts out of his mind, had reassured both Loras and Jaime. He was fine, and he and Loras had been given a talking to by Jaime about what to expect. So now, standing there facing the King, John wasn't sure if it was the dream that was making his heart race or the thoughts of the melee to come. Ever since yesterday, there'd been a voice in his head telling him something was off about this melee. Something not quite as it seemed was going on. Now, as he stood there in front of the King, waiting for it to start, it was getting louder and louder, saying it over and over again. He had said hello to Brienne and tried to do the same to the others, but they had just ignored him. Thinking no more about it, he had lined up. But as the herald introduced them and the order was given to begin, he realized he should have paid attention to the voice. Brienne faced off against Waymar Royce to the side, while the 4 other boys approached him and Loras, all of them walking slowly towards them, and as John looked to the King's position, he saw it, the smile on Jon Arryn's face. He'd been set up. The duels had been rigged, all to place him here now where he could actually be hurt. He turned to Loras, who seemed to have come to the same conclusion. "Loras to me," Jon shouted, and Loras and he stood facing the 2 Riverlanders and the 2 Vale boys. 4-2. This should be fun, the blonde Harold Harding said as he swung his sword at Jon. Jon and Loras maneuvered as best they could, but quickly found themselves back to back, facing 2 opponents at the same time. Hadn't been something they had trained at. Loras had told him and Jaime that his brother had started to do it, but Jaime had said that while it would help, they wouldn't need it for a long time. Had the situation he was in been less likely to end with him being hurt, then Jon would have found the irony funny. As it was, though, he was finding it easy enough to fend them off, but almost impossible to take any of them out. The simple truth was that Jon worked better when he moved. It was his quickness, his movement, that was his greatest strength. Being able to dodge and make an opponent miss left far more openings to exploit than standing still and facing them. But with Loras there, he needed to protect his friend as much as himself. So he reined in, his natural instinct, and instead hoped he'd wear them out, as the 2 Vale boys hadn't been able to land a hit on him yet. What are you, the bastard's protector? Can you imagine that a son of a lord protecting a bastard? One of the Riverlanders said as the other moved to join the Vale boys in attacking Jon. "He's better than any of you," Loras said, and John shouted as Loras moved away from him to attack the boy he knew now was a Vance. The other Riverlander, a Piper, had joined the two Vale boys now, and while John wasn't happy, Loras had given up his position. It did free John to move, which he took full advantage of. His sword flew swiftly at Michael Redfort, quickly and precisely, and the other boy was forced back. Piper moved in and John deflected a strike, only to see Harold Harding smirk as he went to attack Loras from behind. John, in moving forward, and Loras, in moving in the opposite direction, had put almost 15 feet between them. He now also had Michael Redford and the Piper in front of him, blocking him from Loras. And as he saw Harding move towards his friend, he knew he would be unable to help. "Loras, watch out," he shouted as Harding swung for his friend's head. Loras managed to duck, but it was over for him. John looked on as he was caught across the side, and then Harding hit him an elbow to the back of the head. Loras crumbled to the ground. The two boys in front of him laughed as they saw the expression on John's face. He looked to see Waymar Royce yield and heard Harding speak to the Vance boy. "You go occupy the freak. We'll take the bastard," Harold Harding said as the Vance went to Brienne. John felt it then, felt it deep inside of him. The fire rising, he let the flames engulf him, let it wash over him, and he turned to face the two boys in front of him. He saw the smug look Harold Harding was giving him, and the flames yearned to be let loose, to burn that look from his face. He nodded and moved towards Redford and Piper, and the dance began. He moved to the left as Redford swung, before he spun and caught the boy across the side. Moving closer, he turned so he was holding his sword blade behind him, its hilt facing Redford. He moved in. The first blow caught him under the chin, the second on the jaw, and Michael Redford fell unconscious to the ground. John turned to the Piper and smiled when he saw the boy's look of shock. Without giving him a chance, he was on him. A dodge right, a parry, and John was behind the boy. He raised his foot, and kicking backwards, he heard the popping of the boy's knee, swinging his sword without looking. He caught the boy hard across the back. He looked to Harold Harding and relished the look of fear on his face. In the corner of his eye, he could see Brienne beat the Vance, and then he looked to see Loras laying on the ground. He looked back to Harold Harding and ran towards him, ducking underneath the swing of the boy's sword. He again used the hilt, and in his fist he slammed it into his stomach. As Harding fell to his knees, John, still holding his sword hilt out, brought it up and slammed it against his chin, watching as the boy who had looked so smug just a moment ago fell back. His eyes were closed as was knocked out. Standing now facing Brienne, he nodded and threw the sword down before running to Loras. He knelt down and checked on his friend, glad to see him coming round. "You'll be all right, just a bruise or two, you idiot," John said, smirking. He helped him up and turned to take him to the back, but Brienne interrupted. "John, it's still you and I left," Brienne said. "No, it's fine. I yield. The day is yours." "What? No, don't. I don't want to win it that way, please," Brienne pleaded. "I'm fine, John. I mean, I will be." "Fight her. Are you sure? It's 5,000 dragons. There's no shame in winning like this," John asked, looking to Brienne. "Would you call this a win?" Brienne said, and John shook his head. "Fine. Then let's do this with honor." "With honor," Brienne agreed. "If you both don't mind, I'll just sit here for a second," Loras said. And John smirked as he almost fell to the ground before sitting down. John walked back to get his sword and looked at the carnage he'd brought. People were carrying the 3 unconscious boys back, and John found he cared not. They had hurt his friend, and they had paid the price. He looked up at John Aaron and couldn't resist the urge to smirk before bowing. "It seems we have one more match, Your Grace," John said, and smiled when the king laughed. Facing off a few moments later against Brienne, John knew he was in for a different fight. The fire was gone. He felt no urge to hurt Brienne, no urge to humiliate or show her up. He respected her, which, given the stance she had taken up, was the right thing to do. Whoever won would win on merit, so be it. To 5 or yield, Brienne? You think you can make me yield, John? Brienne asked. And John couldn't help but laugh. Once she joined in when she realized it was with her and not at her. The first hit caught him by surprise, the power behind the blow almost knocking him to one side, but he began to move. She was good. Very good. And apart from Sir Jaime, he didn't think he'd faced anyone better. She was strong. John was quick. She was exquisite in her technique, so John was unorthodox in his strikes. The second point went to him, as did the third and fourth, but Brienne won the fifth. John faked a spin and she fell for it. He caught her on the side, but she responded with a quick hit, making it 4-3. The two were concentrating so hard on their moves that neither could see the smiles on each of their faces. She moved forward and John jumped back. She pressed, and he danced away. She grew frustrated and he struck. The blow, harder than he'd intended, caught her arm, and her sword fell. He moved towards her and raised his sword to her neck. She nodded. I yield. Well fought, Brienne. Well fought. John said. Bye. He turned to walk to Loras and she walked with him. Even as the herald announced him as the winner, he was helping his friend to his feet, and Brienne helped him half carry, half drag Loras to the back. There were more important things than winning after all.